What's going on, everybody? I love these Monday videos because it's an opportunity for us to kind of exchange ideas and see what other people are thinking about things. And I'm constantly in my mind, I have things going through my head where I'm always thinking about cards. I'm always thinking about my hobbies. I'm thinking about my sports teams. I'm thinking about, work. I'm thinking about cards, and I just love discussing it. So there are times where I ask these questions like I did last week, where I said, I've done a few videos recently that have talked about how a lot of cards have dropped in value. Now, not all cards have dropped in value. It feels like all the stuff that I'm interested in has gone up in value, but a lot of things have gone down in value and they've become more affordable. Now, is it a dip in the market? Is it a permanent correction? Is it just, coming back to reality? Do we have a long ways to go? All of those are, questions, and we all certainly have opinions on them. But I just like talking about this stuff. So when I ask these questions, I'm like trying to get a pulse and get a feel of how everyone else is feeling on these concepts and these topics when it comes to cards. Now, sometimes I ask about what players do we like, or what cards do we like, or what sets do we like. But part of the hobby is value. I mean, a lot of us are spending a good amount of money on our collections. On Friday, I posted a video with my buddy Mike Petty, and we had a conversation of over an hour, and he was showing off cards that he's bought this year, and a lot of them are really, really nice cards. And it was just fun to pick his brain and say, so why have you been interested in this player, and why this grade, and where did you buy this card? Just to see what other people are doing. I've said this before, this is like a place to me, a community where we get to collect together and share ideas together. And I love this opportunity to hear where everybody else is coming from and where they're at mentally. But to me, in a lot of ways, I think of this is sort of like sports talk radio, but sports card talk radio. Now, I know we have sports card radio, and I am not that. But it's the same. It's the concept like sports talk radio, where you have a host who facilitates opinions, and they'll read text from the text line or the chat line, and they'll have callers call in, and they'll have guests on, and that's kind of what I think this channel is we just talk about different things, all things card related. And some of those things won't be super interesting to one person and will be really interesting to another. I'll have comments from people that'll say, why do you keep talking about this? And then I'll have another person say, I'm so glad that you talked about this. And that's okay. And that's great. There are a lot of us out here that get to share ideas, and we can listen to the things that we're interested in and not listen to the things that we aren't. And that's part of the fun, is finding the things where we can all relate and where we all differ. And nobody's right and nobody's wrong. And although maybe we are, I don't know, but it's just having fun. It's just a way to continue our brains thinking about cards besides just doing another eBay search or REA search or whatever. This is not a place, this channel is not a place where I'm just going to start showing cards and tell you about the history of the cards, tell you about the history of the players. There's a lot of channels out there that do that. I like talking in theoretical terms, and I just like talking about these concepts. What do you think is going to happen? Why is it going to happen? And for me, it's a lot of fun. Well, one of the things, again, that I've had a couple of videos on recently is that some cards have been dropping in value. Not all. Again, like I said, not all. I did one video that showed a lot of mid to low grade Willie Mays cards have become very affordable. And in comparing it back a couple of years, the prices are way down. And some people would say, Greg, the prices are way down in everything to a couple of years ago. Well, that's actually not true. There's a lot of stuff that's way up over the last 2 years. Yes, COVID created this bubble. Yes, it created this huge spike in prices. And a lot of stuff has come down in price. And some stuff's come down a little bit, but some stuff's come down a lot. And some cards have stayed high and gone even higher. And to me, that's interesting. Why has that card gone up? Why has this card gone down? Why has this player's cards gone down? Is it all of his cards or just his low grade cards? And then I did another video late last week where I did sort of a market analysis. Now, it's not going to be the be all and end all. It's not going to have, I picked 10 cards of 10 different players over a 10-year period from 1952 to 1962. It's a snapshot. It doesn't paint the whole picture, but it at least gives some insight and some data as to what's kind of happening. And one of the things that I saw in looking at that data in comparing prices from a year and a half ago to now is that Jackie Robinson, at least that card, the 55 tops, has mostly gone up. And Mickey Mantle cards have largely gone up, at least that Mickey Mantle card. In this case, it was a 59 tops. Does that automatically mean that all Mickey Mantle cards have gone up? Of course not. Of course not. But it does mean that that one did. And it does mean that one Jackie Robinson did. And then other players have gone down. And then I also compared how are SGC values compared to PSA values. And in a lot of cases, SGC has kind of caught up on a lot of those players, but on a couple of those players, PSA still seems to have a commanding lead across the board. Why is that? I don't know, but that's because it's not empirical data. A sample gives us an idea of what's happening, and we can kind of talk about it. And to me, again, that's the fun, is talking about it. So this week, what we're going to do is we're going to talk about your responses from last week when I asked the question about, okay, if there's a dip in the market right now, it might be a permanent dip, it might be the start of a bigger dip, or who knows? But are you changing your behavior as to buying versus not buying? Are you buying more with prices down over the last couple of years? Or are you buying less? Are you being more particular about what you buy? Or are you being less particular? Are you buying volume? Are you buying quality? Are you buying quantity? What are you buying? What are you not buying? What are your behaviors doing? And again, a lot of it is why? Why? So lots of responses. Several people said, I'm not buying. I'm holding. I'm being really, really picky. Some people said, oh, I'm still buying, and I'm buying more, and this is great that prices are less. So let's take a look at your answers and your responses. And let's start with the kind of contrarian view, which was, well, the contrarian view of what a lot of us think. A lot of us are like, no, I'm still buying. I'm a card collector. I'm going to continue collecting. A few people said, my behavior has definitely changed, and I'm being a lot more selective. Let's see what those people had to say.
Not everyone is simply buying. Some are holding or selling. My friend Don says, hey, Greg, interesting to see what the Hall of Fame committee will do. Who knows? You should do videos on the other Hall of Fames also. As far as pricing dropping, I'm more picky on what I buy. I'm still buying and holding. Thanks again. This next comment says, Greg, I'm currently on the sidelines and only buying individual choice cards at this point, which have a chance of upward appreciation potential. The market uncertainty is concerning. As for many new players, such as so-called experts and other influencers, have caused damage to the hobby, in my opinion. Long story short, I am a cautionary stance mode, and the unrest in the Middle East and the Ukraine, coupled with a new president in a few weeks, makes it difficult to predict the future of the hobby, economy, and world overall. I tend to be an overthinker and analyze just about everything as an FYI. This is what we Virgos do, I have been often told. Next, my friend Tony says, that was a timely video with the ending being Pete Rose. I personally believe that Dale Murphy should be in the Hall of Fame. As for your question for next week, I'm going to hold. I'm not buying cards for the same purpose as I would stocks or bonds. They are for my enjoyment. It also wouldn't make sense to sell something when it is going down anyways. You should only sell when it is up if you're collecting for investment purposes. And yet one last comment says, not buying unless I see a good deal on something I need. Saving up for Strongsville next year.
All right. Some really great comments there and some really good perspectives and things to think about. I think part of it might be, what amount are you spending on cards? If you're spending, if your budget's $50 to $100 a month, then you're probably not really changing your behavior. But if you're spending lots of money on cards, then it becomes a little bit more important of what your entry point is, right? If you're spending $5,000 a month on cards and you're buying at a point that's really, really high, and you think cards are, or it's low and you think it's going to get much lower, then it seems like maybe you should wait. See, to me, that's why values matter. The main reason values matter to a collector like me is not because I think I'm going to get rich. The main reason that values matter is because if I think cards are going to keep going down, I'm going to probably wait to make the purchase. Because if I wait, then I'll be able to buy more with my money. Right? So if I think that over the next 10 months, prices are going to go way down, then why wouldn't I just wait and buy a bunch of stuff at the National in 10 months when I think prices are going to be much lower, instead of going out and buying it now? One of the snowballs that happens with like the housing market is, if the housing market starts to dip and people think it's going to be a big dip, you go, whoa, why would I buy a house right now? Because they're only going to get cheaper, right? And other people say, well, they've started to go down, so they're way cheaper than they were, so it's a good deal, and a good deal of less than it was is still a good deal. I mean, there's not a right or a wrong answer. But again, to me, because a lot of people will say this, Greg, why do you care about values so much? Why do you talk about values? Well, because I have a finite amount of money, and I want to maximize my buying power and my purchases. So how can I maximize my buying power and my purchases? Well, what I can do is buy good deals, undervalued things, and buy things in dips before they go up, or things that I think are going to go up. So the reason I'll speculate and go, what do I think of this particular guy, Monty Irvin, or Minnie Minoso, or Mickey Mantle, or Willie Mays? Why does it matter if Willie Mays cards are down right now? Well, because if I don't think that they're permanently going to be down, then maybe now's a great time to buy Willie Mays cards. And why does that matter? Because if I want to have a lot of Willie Mays cards, I can buy more Willie Mays cards right now. So if it's a card that you have already, and you're not planning on selling it, you're planning on holding it, you may not care about the values, or you might want the values to go up. But if it's a card that you're looking to buy, if it's gone down, that's not the worst thing in the world, right? Especially if you think it's then soon going to go back up. I think that the takeaways I had is, if the market is down right now and it might go lower, or you think it's going to go lower, or like the one comment said, with the change in president soon, because we're going to have a new president really soon. Whether you like it or not, we are, because it's going to be one of two people, which isn't who the current person is. How that might affect the economy, how their staff might affect the economy, how some of the turbulence around the world might affect the economy, how the hurricane or the dock worker strike, or again, I I personally do this to not think about that stuff. Because that kind of stuff just makes me go, God, this just, I can't control that. What I can control, though, is when I buy my baseball cards. And I can buy more baseball cards when they're cheap, and I can buy less when they're expensive. So I care about values because it allows me to figure out when I can buy more baseball cards. But the whole point of being a little bit pickier, it's like, yeah, if it's a really good deal, I'll still buy now. Or if it's a really rare card, I'll still buy now. Or if it's a card that doesn't come up very often, but I really need it or I really want it, I'll still buy now. Or if it's a really good example at a certain price point. If it's a really undergraded 4 and it's selling at 4 prices, then I'll still buy it. I think that at the very least, if you think the market is going to go lower or could go lower, I wouldn't freeze my buying altogether, because it might be an opportunity where other people are trying to get out. Maybe they're starting to kind of panic sale. Maybe they've lost their job and they need to sell some stuff. I don't know. But if it's a card that doesn't come up very often, you don't really get to choose when you buy. You get to choose if you're going to buy when it's available. So when it comes to that rare stuff, when it comes to the stuff that doesn't come up very often, when it comes to a card that's severely undergraded or in your eyes is undergraded, again, why does it matter if it's undergraded? It matters if it's undergraded because if a card is assigned a 4, but it should have been assigned a 6, and it's in a 4 holder, and you could buy it around 4 prices, you're buying a card that should be a 6 for 4 prices. That's why it matters. But I just think that being more selective is probably a good idea. And if it's a card that doesn't come up that often, I personally would advise somebody, hey, if there's only, a dozen of these out there and one just came up, but you think it's going to go down before it goes back up, but this is an opportunity to get it, and you may not have one for a while, kind of think you need to act. Now, a lot of people also had the opposite opinion. They said, no, I'm buying. So let's hear what some of them had to say.
So without a doubt, many collectors are still buying with a frenzy. The first one says, crazy timing on this video with the passing of Charlie Hustle. Great points made for each one in the video for making it in. As for this week's question, I'm buying, but in all fairness, I was buying before the dip. The only difference now is I'm getting more for my money. It's crazy to think how cheap some upper tier Hall of Fame players are going for at the moment. And another one says, great video, I'm certainly buying. I was priced out for a while. If we are talking Topps and Bowman, there is a ton of this stuff available. The prices should be dropping as they are not rare. I just looked on eBay and saw at least 6 52 mantles for sale. Not hard to find. Spend my budget throughout the year. Prices ebb and flow, and I am not smart enough to time the market. Unfortunately, the National only happens once a year, and I always spend more than half my budget there. So whatever prices sit at each year at the National is the level I add the most to my collection. Cards I bought a decade or more ago, I could barely afford now. Cards do fine over long time horizons, and I likely have 20 to 40 more years to keep adding. I am sure my last year of collecting will make anything I buy in the next decade seem cheap. And finally, one last comment says, I'm always buying something, but in the current market, I've been buying nicer, more expensive cards and will continue to do so until those cards increase in value to the point that I am priced out.
All right, some great comments in there. Great comments. Now, one of the things I want to say is, if you're always buying, right? You're just buying every month. Then sometimes you're going to buy stuff that's overpriced. Sometimes you're going to buy it when it's underpriced. It's like stock investing, right? I have my retirement account set up. And every month I have an automatic deduction withdrawal from my paycheck and then an auto pay where I put some money into my 401k, I put some money into my Roth IRA, and it doesn't matter what the prices are. The price is high, okay. I bought it and it's high and hopefully it goes higher. And if the price is low, okay. Just means I bought more shares than I did the month before when it was high. And hopefully it'll go up. But that whole philosophy of dollar cost averaging is if you just buy and you don't really worry about what's happening in the market, you're going to buy sometimes when things are a great time to buy and sometimes that things are not a great time to buy. And it all works out and you get a dollar cost average and half of the time you're buying at a good time and half the time you're buying at a bad time. And if you're buying something that you like, and you're buying something that you want to have, then what's the problem, right? Like one of the comments said, you get more for your money, right? When during COVID, the stock market plummeted, right? For like the first 3 months, 4 months, it just went way, way, way down. People were panicking, freaking out. And I went out and bought a bunch. I took money out of savings. I bought a bunch of stuff. What did I buy? I said, well, let's see. Everybody's going to be home right now. And so they're probably going to be buying stuff at home. So I bought some FedEx because I figured people would be buying stuff and it'd be getting shipped. And I said, everybody's going to be home. They're probably going to be doing home improvement. What are you going to do if you're home all the time? Yard work and housework and those home repairs you haven't been doing. So I bought a bunch of Home Depot. I bought stuff like that. And 6 months later, when it went back to normal, I did pretty well. And I did the contrarian move of when people are selling, I buy. And if people are selling right now, what are they selling? I've heard a lot of people say, nobody cares about low grade cards from the 50s and 60s anymore. Nobody cares about those. The reason that those Willie Mays cards, Greg, are so cheap is nobody wants an SGC4 1968 Willie Mays. People don't want that. I disagree. I think people do want that. The other thing people say is there's tons of those. And even the comment in there is the 52 mantle. The 52 mantle, he said there were 6 available. I totally believe that. The 52 mantle is not a particularly rare card. It's sort of like the 86 Jordan. The 86 Jordan is not a rare card. There are lots of that card. The thing that makes those two cards expensive is they're iconic and there's a huge demand for them. Huge demand for both of those cards. So even though the supply is relatively high, there's a huge demand. I think that there will always be a demand for Willie Mays Playing Days cards. My personal opinion. Now, is there less demand for a 3 than a 7? Of course. And there's more 3s than 7s. And that's why a 7 is worth a lot more than a 3. But I still think there's a fan base. Just living in Northern California, you go to card shows, and we've set up at some shows. A lot of people come and go, do you have any Willie Mays cards? Do you have any Willie McCovey cards? I just think that and these are not 90-year-old guys, These are not guys that were born in 1935 and watched these players when they were in their 20s. These, a lot of the time, are guys my age. And so I think that, there's a fair amount of supply of those, but it's still Willie Mays. I think, personally, there will always be some demand for that. That card's not going to go to zero. A Davis Mills. I remember watching one time a backyard breaks break. It was during COVID, and I was home and I was just flipping through TikTok or something, and I end up on a backyard breaks break, and they're opening some high end stuff, and they pulled some Davis Mills card, and they were like screaming and jumping and running around. Is Davis Mills still playing? I don't know. Davis, if you're watching this, I apologize. Mrs. Mills, if you're watching this, I apologize. But it's amazing how a card could go from they're screaming and acting like they just, pulled the golden ticket out of a Wonka bar to now I legit don't even know if he's in the league. And maybe he's a starter. I honestly have no idea. But I have a feeling his cards aren't worth that much. That's not happening with Willie Mays. It's not happening with Willie Mays. There's always going to be some value for Willie Mays cards. So I don't know. What's the takeaway? I can say that overwhelmingly there were probably a dozen to 15 comments that said, "Oh, I'm buying," which is kind of what I expected. I mean, we're collectors. We're active in the hobby right now. I expected people to say I'm buying. And then, there were a handful of people who said, "Nah, I'm not really selling, but I'm kind of holding. I'm kind of being picky. I'm kind of, being very specific about what I buy." Yeah, I get that. I get that too. And I don't think, again, one perspective is right and one is wrong. More than anything, I'm just curious about what your perspectives were and what your plans are. And yeah, it's a small sample size, but it's still information. It's still anecdotal, but it's still active collectors in the hobby. Now, I find this stuff fascinating. I find it absolutely fascinating. And I love talking about it. And I love it when you guys respond. Your guys' responses are so much fun to read and so much fun to talk about and share my thoughts on. But yeah, I totally get why people would see some prices coming down and go, "Man, that card that was unaffordable has come down, 20%, and now I can afford it." I'll be honest, my 54 Ernie Banks rookie card that I got in a 5, 3 years ago, that card was way more expensive than it is now. And if it's way more expensive than it is now, I was able to buy other things at the National because the price came down. And for me as a collector, that's fantastic. It's fantastic that I was able to buy other stuff too. So I certainly understand when prices are down, that being a benefit if you're a buyer. Just like when prices are down for me, who's 45 years old, in the stock market, and I'm buying S&P 500 month after month after month, and the price is lower, and this month I'm able to buy more S&P 500 because the price is lower, and I don't have to worry about retiring, unfortunately, for like 15 to 20 years, then the price being lower is actually kind of a good thing long term. Right? I don't know. Let me know what you think. But I think most of you already did, and most of you said, "I'm buying. I'm not worried about it." And I totally respect that. Now, for this week's question, let's take a look at what we've got. So if you were starting a vintage collection right now, starting it, and somebody asked me a recent question about this, which it really has been on my mind. So I'm like, I want to ask all of you. But if you were starting a vintage collection right now and you had $1,000 to start it, where would you put it? If you could only buy 3 cards, and you had $1,000 to purchase, what would you buy with the $1,000? What 3 cards would you start your collection with? And again, more importantly, why? Now, You all have asked me this question in a couple of different ways before. I've talked about this a few times in a couple of different ways before. But I think the point of the question is, if you were to start from scratch, you didn't have anything, where would the priority be? Where would the priority be for purchasing cards? Is there a certain player that you would target? And if so, which of his cards and why? Would you try to get a variety? Would you try to get 3 different players, 3 different years? If so, why? But $1,000 to start a vintage collection, but you have to spend it on 3 different cards. Now, could be a $900 card and 2 $50 cards. Could be 3 $333 cards. That's part of the fun. How would you spend your budget if you were starting again right now, didn't have any cards, but you had $1,000 to start with, and you had to buy 3 cards? I think this is fun, and I think that the perspective you're going to show is going to tell a lot about how you collect. And that's the part that I'm most excited for. So leave your comment below. I look forward to talking about several of them next week. And I appreciate all of you when you leave a comment. Thanks so much.